Alright, up next is to save Malikov from this Genesis station in Utah.
Huh. Utah. How many games take place in Utah?
Mostly because, it's desertic.
Well, a Doctor Who episode took place in Utah. Yeah,
What's
it was filmed in
that?
Cardiff, but still.
What's that? What's that state in the U.S. That is like the least inhabited state? That's like mostly just desert and winds.
Texas.
Like,
Oh, no. Texas has
Texas
a
doesn't have people.
huge population.
Nevada?
Wyoming. That's it. I think it's Wyoming. Is it?
I thought it was Nevada.
Is it Jova?
No, Pedro was right. It's Wyoming. Only a population of 100,000.
Yeah. The joke that I keep hearing is that most of the population of Wyoming is just hostile winds.
I mean, I guess when it comes to making voting counts, they have an easier job there. Anyway, in order to rescue Michael, first of all, we need to secure the landing zone. Again, taking another page from Call of Duty, because this type of scenario was very common, as far as from what I've been told, for stuff like Modern Warfare. Thankfully, the story itself, as you may notice, does not parallel really something like, say, the actual story of Modern Warfare or a real-life event like, say, the War on Terror in Iraq. They're doing pretty much relatively different things. But a couple of set pieces, you definitely feel, like I said, are more, more focused on the modern U.S. militaristic kind of tactics that also do feel a bit odd for a 1950, even sci-fi, altered, 1950 U.S. military. But, you take what you can get.
Call of Duty has occasionally done some outlandish stuff, like, if I recall correctly, they had that one campaign.
Remember, Jova, Modern Warfare was the start of the big changes, because up until that point, it was just mostly a retreading of World War II, or at best, the idea of something attached to the Cold War, like the threat of a Russian invasion. Modern Warfare 2 shook things up by really establishing fictional plot that were set in modern day with titular Modern Warfare, with still stuff like the perspective of Russian invasion. Again, the infamous no Russian mission in the airport that caused a lot of controversies, but despite that, it wanted to resemble a bit what was going on in the real world at the time, which was the war on terror in Iraq, of course. And by turn, that kind of spilled over in a bunch of other FPSs like this one. Also, watch out, because there are a couple of chameleons in this place, and with all the ruckus going on, you're only gonna have a bunch of, seconds to notice them, potentially.
So, is the gameplay with them pretty much identical to how it was in the first game, or do you have more tricks
like
to
I
deal
said,
with them in this game?
the chameleons are the ones that got introduced in this game, They just, like I said in a few parts ago, like that one, they show up out of nowhere. They're cooked most of the time. They use an owl, call as their trademark sound effect, and as they rush towards you, their camouflage is short for a millisecond, giving you a split fight or flight reaction in order to deal with them.
I don't know why, but I just momentarily gaslit myself into believing that these guys debuted in the first game around the final alien level.
The thing is that, it's understandable, because it makes sense in story that the Chimera would develop. Since the Chimera is basically as far as they know, the Chimera are constructs made from a virus that injects, people and reshapes them, remodel them according to a higher will, supposedly. It kind of makes sense that not all species were present in the UK will come back here, and instead new ones would show up, as in the Chimera adapting to the territory. It's logical. But at the same time, you kind of lose a bit, because some of the enemy designs from the previous games were relatively unique, and it's a shame losing them, So a couple of them will return for the third game, like the Widowmaker, thankfully, but you'll have to see how that turns out. It's also worth noting something that I didn't really mention, and it's not relatively immediately clicking, but that for the bigger Chimera, they're not just like one person that was reshaping to be big, as a result. They're basically Gestalt entity, both modeled by, modeled by multiple people, compressed into, one giant being. Not necessarily for these guys that are on screen right now, but like I said, for stuff like the Titans, or even the Angels, they definitely are the case. It's gonna be slightly important for stuff that happens in this game and in the next.
Let's see.
Alright, so let me use also this time, because we're gonna be stuck with this military troop for a while before we start reaching Malikov, to talk a bit more about the rest of our team. So why not? Starting with the hothead of the team, Joseph Capelli. Since it basically is the more important one, he was the protagonist of the major part of the comic series.
Our resident Maverick, I guess.
We will actually see more of a snippet of his kind of personality at the end of this part and the beginning of the next. Again, like I said, while not identical to Val Kilmer's character in Red Planet, he comes relatively close.
I bet.
Also, sorry, this section, you are supposed to go inside a bit and then immediately retreat. Even the game tells you to do it. Like,
Immersive.
why couldn't you just make the game, the enemy just spawn out as you were approaching, instead of making to do this back and forth? It kind of feels unnecessary.
I think it's like their idea of, the playable cutscene. Like, technically you are in control, but do it this way so that it works cinematically.
I mean, I don't mind because it doesn't like slow my movement or run into a scripted event, but it just feels unnecessary.
It's that same mentality of, you are still technically doing gameplay, but it helps develop something of a cinematic moment, which was all the rage at the time, for better or for worse.
Right,
I bet you that if Cartwright, okay, I bet you, had they decided already that Cartwright was going to live, he totally would have been a member of the posse.
Keep in mind, he's British, he's busy there, he's gonna show up again in Retribution instead, so he's busy in Europe.
It wouldn't be the first time we've seen a Brit help out an American
government.
government.
Now, since Daedalus is in this installation, he starts telepathically talking to Nathan Hale and trying to, dissuade him for keep going. Thankfully, this is actually one of my favorite levels of the game because we're gonna get a unique variation later on the gameplay. For the time being, this unit is gonna, aside from a few occasions, the unit is gonna have to hold the line on this bridge, while Nate and a few others try to circle around them in order to catch them from behind.
Very nice.
Again, it's also a good showcasing of Nate as a military, lieutenant. I think that's his grade, because they could have just say that that's his grade and do nothing with that, but it shows good attitude and quick thinking for a strategy. So there is that.
I do dig that we do get to see his leadership capabilities a lot better in this game. I mean, granted,
and again, we're gonna also see it for the next two missions, at the very least, when it comes to the main team. We already seen stuff like that also from the previous mission in Idaho, but we're gonna see a bit more on that. Alright, let me let's see what I can say. Alright, not too much important when it comes to the actual origin story of Capelli. Maybe if there's something important I can mention it another time. Like I said, the very important stuff is that apparently it was court-martialed by something that he did in the military, but because of the impending potential menace for the Chimera, he was relocated to Project Abraham, as he was also injected with the same thing that also Nate has, the idea of becoming similar to a Chimera but without the side effects. As long as he takes the injections regularly, meaning also regenerations and a bit of a heightened senses. The idea is that he was supposed to actually lead a bunch of people in Alaska, because, like I said, with the ability to terraforming and starting in Russia, the Chimera obviously would have tried an invasion on foot by there, which really makes sense when you get down to it. So instead, Capelli was supposed to go there with a bunch of people in order to check the situation, prevent the Chimera from coming, and rescue, like I mentioned, Oppenheimer. As you can imagine by his presence, the division is secretly involved with the atom bomb, since World War II never happened and it has never been used. And to give a long story short, Oppenheimer unfortunately dies. Most of the rest of the unit that Capelli was having dies. Capelli is forced to detonate the bomb, the atom bomb, which basically creates a zone that doesn't allow the Chimera to actually progress, basically cutting them off from invading on foot from Alaska. But because of what happened with Oppenheimer, Capelli is essentially considered honorably discharged and just stick with SRPA. The only reason why he's not properly executed is because he's useful for the SRPA unit and all on this. New weapon time. Speaking of what Capelli was having, the minigun. I don't remember what it's called.
I was going to say that would have been a dark ending for the movie.
The Whap Wraith. The Whap, high velocity armor piercing Wraith, fires 1200 rounds per minute and is the deadliest of all and-field weaponry. It also boasts the first successful infusion of human Chimera tech, deploying an energy shield capable of stopping anything short of auger fire. The weapon's secondary mode deploys an anchor to increase accuracy. However, this feature forces the user to remain stationary while firing. To fire the Wraith, press R1 to deploy the anchor, press L1, press R2 to toggle Chimera shield on and off. It cost $400,000 to fire this weapon for 12 seconds. But yeah, that's basically the gist of it, Capelli is basically a hothead. He's misunderstood because he was doing good things, but got mistaken for, being a traitor. But he still, believes that he can do good stuff for, by working with SRPA. That's also explains why he's a bit more, hothead compared to the others. Also, just to mention quickly, you're not really seeing because, again, of the jump cutting, but this section is kind of ballsy in terms of the difficulty, because despite you having the minigun and the shield, the enemy will immediately turn towards you the moment you fire, and the other NPCs on the other side won't be able to do that much. So the best thing you can do is to save your grenade and chuck them up, immediately to gain maximum, maximum victims as a result. There you go. All right, if I recall correctly, we're about to actually reach where things are getting interesting.
Malikov is alive.
We copy you, Echo 1. Now get the doctor out of there. There's a bird on the way.
These basically the rest of this place doesn't, while still having a couple of enemies, is gonna quickly stop having them. And instead he's gonna focus more on not necessarily puzzle solving, but something close to that. So this is actually one of the points where the game doesn't really try to be like Call of Duty. Instead, tries instead to have its own original identity. And you can tell it's also one of the highlights of the game, because one thing that will show up, that I will mention properly later, would retroactively inspire an element from one of the Ratchet & Clank games that were developed around the same time. I mean, like I said, it also helps that TJ Fixman was the writer of both. But yeah, something or someone has killed these people. Uh-oh.
Zubats are mutated from the looks of it.
I'm sure it's nothing important. Let's move on.
They must have gone this way. That's one of Malikov's team in there. Door's not working. How do we get in there?
These doors work on pressure plate, basically.
Where it goes, we'll get the
Oh fuck, more auger people.
Hey, maybe the Ochre people can help us. We can get them all to stand on the cone first, and then we'll throw their corpses onto the pressure pad.
It's clever, but that's unfortunately not how it works, because it seems that the pressure plates are not working, period, so just putting a body won't do the trick.
Well,
it's more of a case where we need to reactivate the energy. There you go. Like I said, whenever there are ogre enemies nearby, always prioritize them because they really are a bitch to deal with. Again, thank God that the ogre was actually upgraded to be actually useful this time around.
Interesting.
Here you go. Alright, if I remember correctly, that is... Ah.
Turn back. You are too late. You are leading your men to their deaths.
You sure we're going the right
Turn
way,
the game
Lieutenant?
console
Yeah,
off right now.
I'm sure.
What? What did you
Won't be
say?
much farther now.
The mission is a failure. Cut the power right now. What's wrong with you? Don't worry, Teo. It's a game. It's a game, just like usual.
You'll ruin your eyes playing so close to the TV.
Alright, here we go.
Hurry! It's out here! Let me in!
There's somebody outside.
Yeah, taking another cue from the mummy with Brendan Fraser's The Mummy, it's a swarm of something attached to the Chimera. And yeah, you cannot fight it, just fucking run.
So it's like the agents and Enter the Matrix.
Kinda, to an extent. Well, it's more like this kind of mini swarm that not infects you, but basically destroys you. Like I said, this was the inspiration from one of the obstacle hazards from Regiment Crack in Time, actually. In a couple of sessions in that game, you actually have to deal with a bunch of swarms similar to that, only that they operate on the ground and not in the air. And you need to actually, divert their attentions using a weapon that shoots a substance here to nectar or honey. That's pretty cute.
Copy that.
You'll be able to see when we get to that game.
Echo 1 to all X-ray units.
Unfortunately, the rest of the unit of Nate has been eliminated because of this, so it's only up to him to rescue Malikov.
5 by 5, Echo. Moving out now. Hold the LC until our birds are...
And yeah, basically that means that for the rest of the level,
Echo 1, I need you and
Hale has to deal with this swarm and finding a way to outsmart it and potentially find a way to destroy it.
full assault. The only play left is to outthink these bastards and...
Yeah, basically what Blake said.
The best chance we've got.
For instance, right now, for the time being, we just need to... If you notice, they tend to come in and out from those air grates. Like so. So what you need to do is to actually... They cannot actually pass through these doors, so the best is to actually bait them to go around here, so that they're actually now behind you, then sprint again and coming from the direction you were supposed to go anyway. Thankfully, like I said, your sprint button does not actually have... a limited use. You don't consume stamina or anything. Thank God. Oh, here we go.
Malikov? Nathan, thank God. We must hurry. I was unable to destroy the controls. I could not stop him. He's going to activate it.
Such arrogance. They think that we are a disease to be destroyed, when in fact, we are the evolution of man. You think this planet is...
I'll take a bit.
It was our first damage.
Yeah, this basically gives a bit of lore to the Chimera. The idea that supposedly our species is even more ancient than humans.
Eyes will shine with our stars.
Also, fun fact, this was the level where I got a glitch that I actually was teasing about before. Specifically...
You are overdue for inhibitor treatment, Nathan. You have become vulnerable.
Sorry. Specifically, that for some reason he completely cut away the voices. Just the voices, not the entirety of the sound, just the voices. The music was fine. So you got scenes like that dialogue where nothing happened. So basically, you got scenes like that where the character will just move their mouth and no sound will come out, while instead ambient sound and the music were present.
Thank God for the subtitles, I guess.
It really was weird because it was very specific and only for that level. Resetting the game actually did not have that happen, but I don't even know how that happened in the first place. Like when I think of a bug, I think something like a texture missing, the ragdoll physic jerking off like that. We encountered that in the past, but a sound glitch like that was very unique. Again, shame that I did not encounter it again for this one because it would have been a bit hilarious. Anyway, what Malikov says now is important. The idea is that the chimeras that were present all those eons ago before humanity are called so-called the pure chimera, and the ones that are right now in the present technically are not, because it's a virus that has corrupted and reshaping the human beings.
That should slow them down.
Right.
So basically, for the time being, you have to escort Malikov. Don't worry. Like I said, it's characters that you have to escort work on Last of Us logic of having infinite health and not being really harmed. So you don't have to worry about them.
Cool.
Well, as you yourself usually say too, if it wasn't like that, the entire game would become an escort mission. So maybe that's for the best.
I still have to give myself the courage to try once more Never Dead. The copy is still sitting on my shelf, taunting me.
Oh, what's the story?
Remember,
about?
Jova? Well, remember, Jova, you did ask me when we covered that E3 Konami conference. It's an IP done by one of the people, suicide people who worked on Metal Gear. It's basically their attempt to get their own Devil May Cry by literally having a demon hunter from medieval ages who survived, kind of like a Highlander that survived until modern day, cannot be killed. It can still technically be in game, just in creative ways, but technically cannot be killed. And as a result, it becomes an escort mission constantly where you're running around with people who can be killed and you need to watch out for them. I genuinely, honest to God, gave it a try, but it became tedious very quickly. I'll need to try it again at some point. Especially because it did not receive the PC port, so again, the console version is all we have right now.
Oh, what a shame it wasn't well.
So why did he leave you alive back there? I believe letting me live is a form of revenge. He wants his creator to witness the ultimate Chimeran victory. His creator? During Project Abraham, I took genetic material from the pure Chimera you saw here. I infused it into 2 of the human subjects. The first was a man you knew, Private Jordan Shepard. The man you now call...
Oh, snap.
Obviously. And who's the other?
And the second?
It was...
Me.
You!
I believe you already know, Nathan.
Yeah, Hale is the second one of these enhanced, quote-unquote, program inside the Sentinel program. If you want to know more about John Shepard, how he became Daedalus and everything, you need to read issue 0 of the comic.
So I'm guessing
Honestly, I
Daedalus...
thought the twist. I thought the twist was going to be the second one was actually that old guy.
No, Malikov is just a scrawny scientist from Russia. Anyway, the situation here gives Malikov an idea. Since this swarm does not manage to enter that particular force field, inside that particular test chamber, maybe if we can manage to trap inside them, we can actually destabilize them or something. So that's what we need to find out. Yes, Pedro?
I'll actually go on, Jova.
Yeah, so I'm guessing the idea with Daedalus is that Daedalus will essentially be the main antagonist of the franchise up till, like, the 3rd one, since I guess now that he's been mutated, he figures, screw humanity, I'm aside with the Chimera, since they made me.
Well, it's not doing it consciously. The idea is that the mutation has reached such a critical, important level that it has become basically an actual Chimera. So not thinking anymore. Remember, it's kind of like the equivalent of an hybrid, just in the form of an angel. Just because it still talks, that doesn't mean it still has humanity inside him.
Which, in a sense, I think also makes an interesting parallel. It's one of those cases where, of course, the one experiment who did come out right, Hale, gets to keep his humanoid appearance, whereas John Shepard, unfortunately, was a more failed experiment and thus has become like a chimera in appearance.
You'll see how this actually, culminates by the end of the game.
In regards to the
Yes, but-
creator, I presume that's referring to like the
Malikov,
mother.
yes.
Yeah.
No, the Doctor Malikov. That's what he's referring to. Again, like Malikov just explained. Yeah, there you go. But like Malikov explained, it's more of a case where in order to actually try to have a fighting chance against the Chimera, he did these kind of experiments by having tissue of a pure Chimera injected into human beings as a result. The game doesn't mention it immediately now, but it's gonna become clear if not in this game, in the next instead. But he also created the Cloven, those human war hybrids that were mentioned sporadically in the first game. We'll learn more about that apparently in Retribution. I don't know yet the details. And again, Shepard was technically the first part of the program, but unfortunately, because it was just experimental and did not receive the shots in time, he eventually got turned into Daedalus and effectively became part of the Chimera hive mind. And remember, angels are basically command units, which means now the Chimera do have a very powerful one inside American soil, which means it's perfect material for having an actual antagonist for this game.
Once I learn to master those patterns, I will
Yes, Pedro?
Going back to the whole, to be fair to Gears of War, by the time we got to Gears 5, this where like in order to find out why Marcus and Kate are so chummy all of a sudden, you had to read a comic that was released in between 4 and 5. So it's,
actually, yeah,
so even Gears eventually fell into this.
That's
trap.
a good segue because I did forgot to mention when I talked about the extra material. I had to say, because like I said, I did scour through this. I had to say at least the Gears of War comics were actually engaging to read, and I was interested in them. Like I said, the time comic to this series is very insipid and doesn't really tell me anything much. Sure, it's important plot-wise because it tells me about Capelli, John Shepard, and to an extent it's also a part of a backstory that is not really needed, like I said, of the protagonist of Retribution. Too long didn't read. He's basically a British soldier that saw his brother being turned into a Chimera, but that part is actually seen in-game. So the comic basically serves to be a gigantic, recollection of his past life before, the war started. I love how Malikov was just tanking the laser.
I will say that maybe not all tie-in comics were like that at the time, but having, thanks to the internet, I've been able to get a look at a lot of tie-in comics that, as a kid, I just could not get my hands on. And I gotta say, I do wonder if a lot of companies were hinging on the fact that people would really want to read this to know what was going on, so they didn't really have to try with them, because, my god, do a lot of tie-in comics not really feel
I honestly
like
don't even know who was technically the first who started this, or maybe Gears popularized it, but I don't think it was that one that started it.
And to be fair, not all of them are bad, but it does feel like a lot hinge on, we know you want to read us just to find out about this here, so here you go, and it doesn't really.
And like
feel
I said,
much
however, at the
substance.
very least, the Gears ones genuinely do seem to have a decent amount of effort that made me engaged to actually, give a damn about what was written in them. Well, but I'm sorry, like again, the story of Capelli is important, sure, but it's so stretched out and the dialogue is so insipid that I so don't give a shit.
It's spin-off material of a story that wasn't even really all that renowned to begin with. Like, granted, I know that Resistance has its fans, but Resistance is not what I would call highly popular.
There you go.
these days.
That's what you have to do. Trap the swarm inside a couple of times, although you need to pass between each test chamber, and then use the rail cannon to shoot it.
Look at us, literally shooting a swarm to death.
It's still very cool, and like I said, it's a point where the game actually tries to do something new and original that's, you can maybe chuck it up and say it's more inspired by Half-Life, but, I'll take it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Again, basically do this 2 more times in these different test chambers and you're good to go. The big problem is trying to bait effectively the swarm into coming inside because it's not that dumb in terms of artificial intelligence. I'm trying, Doc.
Come on.
And yeah, if you just shoot it, just, dodges the bullets by giving comical holes.
Have you got a flamethrower?
Surprisingly not, the dragon does not return for some reason in this game.
Seems like
yeah, like
this
you
would
said,
be a perfect level for
other,
it, too.
other than the enemies, a lot of the weapons do not return for reasons by escaping, because a lot of them genuinely were cool. That weapon that splits the bullets into packets, that one doesn't return for any of the games in the series. And it's a crying shame, because that one looks so cool. Again, the idea might have been a case where, since it was tucked in behind New Game Plus, the Insomnia thought that maybe not many people unlocked it. But again, it's kind of a problem with the fact of relegating stuff behind New Game Plus. Maybe that caused the problem. Because it reminded me of something that kind of happens between the second Infamous 2 and Infamous Second Son, where the story of, without giving too much spoiler, the story branches off at the end of Infamous 2 are very clear in the way the story should have progressed. But then, Sucker Punch decided to progress the story in a almost completely different way because they noticed that a lot of people had not picked one story branch that would have made sense for the story to continue, and they decided to improvise about it. There we go. There you go, done it. It's also potentially a showcase of the game by having all those particles at the same time, So there's that too. And unfortunately, the swarm is actually one of the things that they actually situational for this place, so we'll not actually meet it again. But again, it's cool. Again, it's a cool set piece at the very least.
All right.
Now it's just a matter of getting back to the surface.
I feel like, to add to what Joe was saying earlier, I feel like the thing about these games is that Gears is the Gears games, while being definitely parts of their time, they did manage to stand the test of it as well. As we've talked about in our commentaries of them, where we played those games way after their heyday, right? This game, on the other hand, this is definitely a part of its time, and definitely is struggling to survive the passage of it, because it definitely reeks of all of the stuff that made so many of these games at the time be forgotten about. I mean, it's not that these games are necessarily bad; they perfectly function as first-person shooters.
It's just very apparent how much a lot we're hinging on their multiplayer.
Yeah, like the campaigns didn't really have the same kind of effort that you see in something like Halo or Gears.
Nowadays, a lot more games are getting called out for not having good single-player content.
Malikov has explained a bit already in his last campaign. Now, the goal of Daedalus is basically to activate a lot of the towers. Remember, the Chimera, had them buried, that they're activating them. If Daedalus manages to activate the towers, it will manage to complete a sort of a global transformation that will accelerate the process of assimilation of humanity. So that's what, Nate and the others have to, stop Daedalus for. It's, again, essentially a more clear goal too. The new Java.
It's like, I feel like, back when these games were all the rage, I get why multiplayer was a big focus. Obviously, not everyone was in on it, but multiplayer being this thing and online was a relatively new thing, and something that was catching on like hotcakes. Heck, even to this day, multiplayer online is a force to be reckoned with. Granted, nowadays it gets a lot more scrutiny, especially with stuff like always online features or online games hinging on that fit here and there. Like, they'll be put to more scrutiny. Again, some games know how to handle this better. Look at Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 is probably one of the best examples of how you do this in a modern day and age. And for instance, it is priced properly to that regard too. Now, I would not be surprised if the main reason single-player campaigns were added was so that they could justify a full price point of $60, essentially. Which, okay, good and well. And
you also have to remember, Jova, that back then, Sony was still also struggling for the PS3 to actually be as impactful. Not necessarily around the third game of these, Resident 3, but still with this game, at this game period, 2008, this was still the early years of PS3, so they needed a bunch of IPs, and proper games, and compared to the PS2 output that they had, both first and third party, they did not add as much, hence the meme of PS3 has no game. So obviously, trying to justify it also, having a full price for having a campaign for their shooters was probably something that they had no choice but to do it. Again, I still have to technically play. What are you doing? I still have to technically properly play the Killzone games, but I have a hunch that they're gonna be roughly on the same level as these.
And mind you, I personally would recommend to have a good solo story or campaign, essentially. It's just that it is a shame to see that, unfortunately, a lot of the story campaigns feel like they were tacked on or just put in for obligation. I'd say with Resistance, I can see the efforts, though I also do get the inkling that, the full force was not put behind the single-player campaign at that. Now, it doesn't feel...
To be fair, for this one, they did add specifically the writer that they were having for the Ratchet & Clank games, so some type of conscious effort was actually made, I suppose.
Oh, yeah. Like, okay, I will say this. Like, it doesn't feel brain dead, and it doesn't feel like they straight up didn't care about single-player content. It does, however, still have that inkling of the multiplayer comes first, we spare whatever we can for the single player.
I also get the feeling that this franchise doesn't really speak to TJ Fixman's strengths.
Okay, like I said, I can tell you that it has the best writing for me compared to, and yes, so while 3 technically is not, really that bad, it's just so insipid and you'll be able to see. Yeah. Anyway, end of the mission, and as you can imagine, remember, Hale has not been taking his injection for a while, so not everyone is gonna be pleased about it. Yeah, Capelli, as you can imagine, is not really happy about this.
They'll totally be best friends by the end, won't they?
Offer accepted. Now, until that time arrives, let's consider the subject closed.
He's choking one of our men, sir. Kill him!
Why am I getting reminded of Untown the Freeman?
Oh god, it does kind of have that.
It kind of is a bit like Mitchell. But before finishing on, continue, Pedro.
Well, those never say never. Martin Scorsese directed Hugo.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, though. That's the thing, though. In spite of Hugo being more family friendly, fair compared to his other stuff, that at least also included things that Scorsese himself was interested in, like the history of filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
What about My Little Pony would involve Christopher Nolan?
No, that is definitely much more of a even more of a weird contrast compared to that one. No, well, okay. How about this? How about Francis Ford Coppola directing Jack? That's like one of the That's one of the most contrast things I ever heard. The director of The Godfather and Apocalypse Now directing a crappy, feel-good, sentimental comedy with Robin Williams.
And from what I hear, that movie did not take well.
No, at all.
No.
Anyway, tune in for the next part where the team has to go instead for the next mission, which is in Chicago. So see you for that.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.